Welcome to AI for Good, the leading, action-oriented, global and inclusive United Nations platform on AI. Organized by the International Telecommunication Union, the United Nations Agency for Digital Technologies. In partnership with 40+ UN, sister organizations and co-convened with Switzerland. The goal of AI for Good is to identify innovative applications, build skills and standards, and advance partnerships to solve global challenges. In today's AI for Good event, we are counting on you to use the live video wall feature, to ask questions and post comments to help create an engaging discussion. We encourage you to stay until the end to chat, connect, ask questions, and network with our distinguished facilitators and world-class AI experts in the neural network. It is now time to kick off the session and welcome our first speaker. The floor is yours.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to our third episode of the Voices in Quantum series. My name is Sanskriti Deva. I'm a Associate Quantum Product Marketing Manager at IBM Quantum, and this series is a monthly series supported by the ITU and IBM in honor of the International Year of Quantum. Each episode features leaders advancing quantum across academia, industry, and policy. And the goal is to inspire, inform, and empower through authentic storytelling and leadership insights. And today, I'm excited for a very special episode where we are going to meet three founding trailblazers shaping the quantum industry. First, we have Celia Merzbacher, the Executive Director of the Quantum Economic Development Consortium, Kiara Peltz, the founder of the Coding School, and Kirsten Nair, the Chief Operating Officer at Algorithmic. So, welcome all. We are so excited to have you. And to get us started, the first question I wanted to ask was, what was the moment that you realized you wanted to lead in quantum and not just participate in it? And the floor is yours, whoever wants to take that.
Well, maybe I'll start because I have a very personal connection in a way. My career started, and I don't always include this in my biography, but my degrees in college and graduate school were in earth science. And then I transitioned to materials science and became a materials researcher. But my father was a quantum physicist. And so I grew up with quantum in the house. And I think he would be really pleased with the moment that quantum is having. And so I feel like it's a sort of personal journey for me. But I know not everyone has a physicist for a father, and that's not necessary at all for a successful career in quantum today. There's so many opportunities, but thank you.
That's awesome. And then I'll hand it over to Kirsten.
That's a very nice story, Celia. Unfortunately, I was not also a quantum physicist, but my career has always been at the intersection between sort of innovation, tech, and the life science and industry. Actually, as a trained biologist, eventually when I came across quantum, it sort of all clicked in place because I remember back at university always thinking, as soon as you got to the sort of microscopic levels of detail into the cells or molecules, a lot of the interactions were sometimes inexplicable. And so for me, quantum was really a way to finally really delve into understanding, okay, a lot of what some of the inexplicable things that we have in biology and really being able to dive deeper into that and make sense of it all. But again, I think it wasn't something that I had planned for. It sort of happened and made a lot of sense to me when the connection happened sort of over 3 years and a half ago.
Awesome. And then Kiara.
Yeah, so I definitely did not plan to end up in quantum, and I really stumbled into it, and I'm so grateful that I did. I run an education nonprofit focused on advancing computer science education, and one of our volunteers um, in 2019 approached me and said, you have an AI curriculum, you have a computational genomics curriculum. Why don't you have a quantum computing curriculum? And at the time, I really didn't even know what quantum computing was. And after she spent about 2 hours educating me on what quantum computing was and its potential, I was like, well, of course, we should be teaching students this. Of course, we should be training the next generation. And so I was really excited about it. But I think what really got me wanting to do more was, when we put out our first summer camp for high school students. And at this time, there was not a lot of conviction that you could teach high school students or early learners quantum computing, especially without any STEM background. And the level of enthusiasm that we had at the start of the program was unparalleled. We were only going to, I think, accept 100 students into the program. We end up getting close to 400 applications in a really quick period of time. And so we thought, wow, kids are really excited to learn about this. And then, at the end of the program, the enthusiasm was even higher and students wanted more. They were craving more. And I thought, wow, this is an incredible way not to just be introducing students to quantum computing, but really be introducing them to all of STEM. I think the interdisciplinary nature of quantum is just so fascinating, obviously, for quantum technologies, but also just how it relates to all these other STEM fields and applications.
That's amazing. So throwing it back to you, Kiara, you've taught thousands of students globally quantum education. What personal values have guided you in building for impact? And how has that journey been like?
Yeah, so, over the last 5+ years, we've taught about 25,000 students and educators from over 130 countries at this point, which we're really proud of kind of the access that we've been able to provide in introducing students from all walks of life and all backgrounds, students as young as 10 to I think our oldest student at this point might be around 75 or 80, to quantum computing and all of its potential. I think really at the core for us has, in terms of our values, has always been access. And I mean that in several ways. But first and foremost, just making sure that as many people as possible do have the opportunity to learn about quantum. And so that means whenever possible, making sure that there's virtual programs, making sure that they're free, or we're providing scholarships for any student that has financial need and desire to learn. But it goes beyond just kind of those structural elements. We found in our first course that we had almost 10,000 students in our first 2 semester long course it was an introduction to quantum computing. It was for high school students. And then we actually opened it up to university students and current members of the workforce because of the interest. And it was supported by IBM. So we're really grateful for kind of the founding support to get our course off the ground. But one thing that we quickly realized is, we had several hundred students from developing countries that were taking this course on their cell phones. And at the time, we were not equipped or prepared to offer the course via cell phone. We had the course requiring a computer over Zoom. And quickly realized we're like, wow, if we truly want to make this accessible, we need to figure out how we can offer this also via mobile phone. So we can make sure that all students, especially those that don't have access to a computer, can still be learning quantum computing. And so, yeah, really accessibility has driven everything that we do. And I like to say, especially in a field as complex as quantum computing, that just because content is available doesn't mean that it's truly accessible. And that's something I drive home to our team all the time, particularly from a curriculum and instructional perspective, is we can be producing content, but if students can't actually be grasping it, if we're not making it as intuitive as possible, if we're not removing as many prerequisites as possible, we're not actually making it accessible. We're just making content available. And so, yeah, overall, really accessibility, I think, is a key driving force for us in all of the work that we do. We really want to make sure at the end of the day that every student feels and knows that they can learn quantum computing as long as they're willing to put in the work.
Wow, that's amazing. You said oldest 75 and then youngest 10.
Yeah.
Wow. So I feel like one of the reasons I love this panel as well is we have three different leaders from three different areas of the industry. And so Celia, while Kiara is focusing on the educational and accessibility aspect, I feel like you are one of the leading voices in the commercial ecosystem. Could you tell us a little bit more about the QEDC, especially for those who might not be familiar with the industry?
Yes, thank you. QEDC, or the Quantum Economic Development Consortium, was actually called for by the US Congress when it passed the National Quantum Initiative Act in 2018. So the Congress told NIST in the Department of Commerce, the National Institute of Standards and Technology, to establish a consortium of stakeholders. And it intentionally used a very broad word, stakeholders. And the purpose of this consortium was to serve as a community that would connect the private sector, because there already was a lot of investment going on at places like IBM and Google and other startup companies and so on, at the same time that the government was about to make a big investment in research. And they wanted these two sectors to be connected to each other and informed about what each other were doing so that they would be, going together and going faster. So QEDC, I was hired at that time by SRI International to help create QEDC. And we started with a clean piece of paper. And we really had a vision of building a community. So very similar to what Kira was describing. It's inclusive, it's trusted, it's today global, and we admit members from now 39 different countries, and we're increasingly representing the entire global community in ways that I think are going to benefit everyone. And the reason that we aren't just based on US participation is because quantum is global. The talent is global, as we heard from Kira, the interest is global. From a business point of view, the supply chains are global and the markets are global. And so it just made sense. And even though we got our startup funding, I like to call it, from the government, they wanted us from the start to prepare and ultimately to include stakeholders from across the globe, from the trusted community. So we have a process for reviewing applications and accepting organizations that have not only something to gain from being part of the consortium, but also bring something to the community. And so it's turned out to be an extremely valuable part of the ecosystem for that reason, I believe.
Wow, that's amazing. And I feel like I didn't realize how big the quantum ecosystem was when I first joined. And then I heard about QEDC and I went to a QEDC event and I was like, whoa, like there's more than just big companies in the quantum industry. Because I feel like in the news you hear like IBM, Google, Microsoft. So it was really exciting to see all of that community within the ecosystem. And so, talking about that community, Kirsten, you're one of the leaders at very impactful startup in quantum, Algorithmique. Um, what has your experience been like as a startup in this ecosystem?
Thank you for the question. Yes, it's both. Of course, in startups, there's many challenges. You don't necessarily have the same resources as those big companies like IBM, Google, or Microsoft. But actually, I think that's also your edge and your opportunity, because I really believe that the intersection where the innovation happens is often when you are forced to have scarce resources, and that's where breakthroughs tend to happen. I mean, we've heard the story recently with DeepSeek, for example, who've had much less resources from a capital point of view, but also from a team and technology point of view, but are still able to do quite impressive feats. And I think so it's obviously challenging, but exciting at the same time, because you can operate a lot faster, a lot more, have more agility and adaptability to your environment, in order to achieve sometimes what might feel like impossible back, a few years back. And we're now seeing the results of, tremendous amounts of work, which are actually becoming possible. So I would say both challenging, exciting, but I would say in an ecosystem, you need both. You cannot do it alone. You need the big companies, you need the small companies, you need the academic institution, you need QEDC to bring everyone together. You need the academic schools like Kira's coding school to really upscale the talent in order to have an ecosystem that's going to thrive and be successful. And so I always say, actually one of the reasons why I left the corporate world to move into the startup is I realized back in the days in the pharma world, the pharmaceutical industry would not win if they didn't have the relationship and the strategic partnership with startups. And so I wanted to experience what it was like to be in a startup as well, and to bridge the gap. So I think you definitely need both. You cannot go about it alone. The IBMs of this world offer, tremendous, incredible hardware that a software company like Algorithmic would need in order to build the software. But you also need the software to build applications that are useful and to make one of those computers useful. And at the same time, you need the talent to be able to develop and to work together. So I would say it's important to have all of the different players within the ecosystem to reach something exceptional and to reach the advancements that we want to in quantum.
Yeah, I feel like you did such a good job outlining how all of the puzzle pieces fit together. Um, and I think it's really interesting because quantum is such a new industry as well. And so most people who are introduced to it for the first time may not realize, like, oh my goodness, there's so much going on. It's almost like a coral reef with so many different species, so many different corals. But I feel like with all three of your guys' field of expertise, startups, the commercial ecosystem, education, and accessibility, there's one factor that stays pertinent, which is navigating uncertainty, especially in a field like quantum. So I'd love to pass this question on to all of you. Can you share a risk that you took that taught you something essential about yourself or your mission, or a moment of uncertainty that you faced within your roles?
Mm, Maybe I can take this one if you want. Actually, I would say, I mean, even just taking this role was a moment of uncertainty for me. I mean, I'm not afraid to say that parts of the job description, when the recruiter found me, I did not understand. And I think one thing that I learned about myself is that I clearly don't mind complexity or ambiguity. And I think one thing that's always it reinforced itself even more in the last few years is everything is figure outable. You can always find solutions. And actually, I've realized how my interest in complex problem solving really is what's always driven me. I knew I always loved to learn, but I've really experienced that even more recently. And I think speaking of hiring, or jumping into a job, I think being a CRO, you take a lot of risks every day in terms of decision making. And I think probably one of the ones I would say within the role that I've taken that still to this date I find really a bit of a dark art is the hiring process, and you take risks and bringing certain people or making sure you bring the right skill and the right capabilities in the company at the right time. And I suppose one key learning for me was that, interestingly, when there is a certain level of uncertainty and you are faced with two different types of CVs, you often try over-index on the sort of hard skills and the hard experience and the skills that you see on the CV. And actually, one thing that I've learned over and over again is that you should actually take a step back and think, hire for fit and hire for culture if you have two CVs that look quite similar, because that is really the most important thing that we've done at Algorithmic, I think, and really our success has been the people that we've brought in together and the culture that we've built over the last few years. That is something that is unbeatable, and it becomes your edge, actually, where you truly bring some of the smartest minds in the industry who genuinely love to work with each other and genuinely love coming and showing up to work. And I think that's for sure a learning that I've had is actually, if you're in doubt, focus not always on experience, but actually on fit and culture and values, mission as well.
Yeah, I feel like that's such good advice. And one thing that I've noticed within the quantum industry is that oftentimes it's not what you know, it's who you are and how motivated you are to learn. Because with something like quantum, most like there's more not knowing than knowing. And so, Kiera, with your quantum education company, do you have any like unexpected barriers you faced when pursuing like growing this startup, and how have those shaped your future goals?
Yeah, there's definitely, I think, a lot of unexpected challenges from the actual programmatic delivery. And again, how do you truly make this accessible to as many learners as possible, to the more structural side, uh, like funding. Um, I do think probably the most challenging aspect for us, as although quantum is gaining um, a lot of interest and more recognition now. I think that we do have a challenge of, making sure for education that we're able to, fund our programs. As a core goal of ours is to make sure that quantum education is as accessible as possible and financial barriers do not come into play in a individual's journey of being able to learn quantum or not. We try to make as many of our programs free, or provide full scholarships to students who need it. And I think a difficulty in the education space is that education is really slow often to keep up with changes in industry. And if you look at the last 50 years and the technological changes that we've had in the world, our education system really hasn't kept up. And something I've always said is, with our focus on teaching areas like quantum computing, it's like education should be forward looking, and we should be training students for the skills and the technologies, and frankly, jobs that don't even exist now, but will exist when students enter the workforce. And so I think a core challenge is just making it clear why we should be training students for jobs that don't even necessarily exist now, or again, maybe now are starting to exist and become more prominent as quantum technologies continue to make advances. But I think it's really difficult, one, to just build that support, and build that support financially, when again there's so many other competing interests in the education space. And then two, I think in particular for quantum, where you might not need a PhD any longer, necessarily to work in the quantum space, but you still need typically a college degree. And so we're focused not just on training those that are maybe 2 to 4 years out from joining the workforce. We are training those individuals in that are already in their undergrads, but we're also trying to expand the pool of talent of who's going to end up in the quantum space. And that has to start much earlier. And that's why it might sound crazy to say we teach students quantum computing as young as 10 years old, and we get them to actually be coding quantum circuits at that age and learning about quantum protocols and algorithms. But we truly believe that you have to start that early to be building interest, to be breaking down stereotypes and views, that quantum is only for geniuses, which is often what students, by the time they get to high school or university, already think. And a lot of them have kind of talked themselves out of thinking that they could ever do something like quantum, which is not true. And so, being able, I think, to get the necessary funds to really make sure that quantum computing is readily accessible to any learner, I think is a huge challenge just in and of itself. And then second, making sure that those funds are extending to younger students and students who aren't going to be entering the workforce necessarily in the next few years, I think is another critical challenge. And I really hope that we see strides and changes in that. And I think just on that note, I think a further challenge in kind of the funding conversation, which goes back, I think, to an issue just about quantum computing in general, is that it requires a lot of training and kind of continuous support. So I think as opposed to other STEM subject areas where you might be able to build a lot more excitement early on and then have students kind of later in their educational journeys be picking up skills here or there to go into an industry. There's a lot of knowledge that you need to kind of learn and glean. And so we find ourselves continually building out new programs to continue to support students on their journeys, and make sure that they're able to have additional learning experiences and internship opportunities or research opportunities. And so kind of the pathway to support students is quite long as well in this space, which again requires a lot of resources. We've seen amazing results in terms of our students being able to support them on their journeys. We have now, since we're entering our 6th year of teaching quantum to students, we have students this year that started with us in high school and are about to enter PhD programs in quantum, or are entering jobs in the space. And so it's really incredible to see students go through that whole journey. But we started working with these students when they were in high school, and now they're graduating college and going into getting PhDs in this area. And so it's really possible to expand the pool of talent, but it definitely takes resources and time and dedication to make that happen.
Wow.
Can I add to that? Because I think there's everything that Kira said is absolutely true. And if you sort of focus on the original talent pool being PhD graduates, extending the pipeline to younger learners is essential. But we're at a point in time because the field is emerging so quickly and the demand for talent is growing rapidly, much faster than getting students through that long pipeline is able to supply. There's also a need for reskilling and upskilling and opportunities. So we have at QEDC done some studies of what skills are needed by employers, and they are diverse, and many of them don't say quantum physics, they say software engineer or technical sales or low temperature, cryogenic technician. And so there are a lot of current STEM workers with traditional engineering or physical science degrees or even math who, with just a little bit of upskilling, can be readily qualified to pivot into this field. And to Kira's point, the work of the future is going to look very different. We're just seeing that play out in real time with AI and the impact it's having. So for all kinds of reasons, there may be a large pool of talent that is interested in learning about quantum, and they may believe that they have started 10 years ago, but that certainly isn't true. So we have to sort of spread the talent pool in both directions. I think that's really, especially now, very important while we're building the pipeline.
Yeah.
I could not agree more on that. And just a point I'll wanna add on to Celia's point. Um, Kind of those current members of the workforce who just do require a little bit of upskilling. We've had a lot of those individuals kind of do our foundational programs, and I think they need, there could be a lot more targeted programs to support them to getting upskilled quicker and kind of directly into the jobs that would be right for them. But something that we've even seen just kind of on the foundational training is curriculum is not being made for a lot of them, and content is not being made at the level to support them as they're kind of getting started. And so we've had a lot of current members of the workforce who have said, we've tried all these different online modules and content, and the amount of math that they require me to know, I haven't dusted off a math textbook in 20 years, and so that just made this content inaccessible. And so what we found is teaching kind of even current members of the workforce in a lot of cases beginning kind of at a high school level where you're not assuming all of this different knowledge, and recognizing that individuals in industry are kind of often working, they're not in an academic setting, they're not taking classes across a ton of spaces. Like we need to meet them more so where they are at, and then they can readily and quickly be learning this content. So I do think that is a great point, and something that like people are hungry out there to actually be engaged, and they can once they're able to start learning, but there just aren't often those upskilling opportunities that are needed.
And I really like a point that you guys both made, which is anyone can learn quantum, anyone can join the industry. You don't have to be from a specific background. And that flows right into my next question, which is how can someone, or what advice would you have for someone who's tuning in who wants to get involved with the industry to get started, or learn more about the ecosystem that you guys are all within? And I'll first throw that to Kirsten, especially with your startup background. I'm sure a lot of people are interested in learning about how to join the quantum startup ecosystem specifically as well. Kirsten, I think you might be on mute.
Sorry,
No worries.
yeah, of course. I was just saying to Kira and Celia's point as well. They are often some of the greatest sort of innovation are often at the intersection between disciplines, and you don't necessarily. You can have a bit of upskilling, but on one end. But if you are looking to do life science or chemistry. You need that diversity of thought and different opinions to come to the problem that you're solving at hand. And often it's actually what we found is bringing, and what the strength of the team at Algorithmic is bringing all these different disciplines together to be able to solve those problems. But to going back to your point, I think one thing that I would say, perhaps for someone that wants to get involved, is almost to embrace the uncertainty, or embrace it, the feeling of not knowing necessarily, and trying to have more of a sort of experimental mindset, and trying out to see if that's something, but keeping very open mind, and experimenting with the space, I suppose. Just yeah, trying out, embracing uncertainty, and just not fearing that you might be not knowledgeable enough, because actually we're all trying to figure it out at this point. In quantum, it's a new field, and actually you realize that even the experts sometimes don't know everything either, and we're all trying together to figure things out. And I suppose the more diverse thinking you've got at the table, the better chance you have at making progress. So I suppose my message here is, um, learn by doing. So get involved, see if it's something for you, but don't be scared, and actually embrace not knowing, because that's probably also your strength, because you might ask certain questions that no one wants to ask in the room. And um, as a CEO, sometimes you've got to say the thing that nobody wants to say in the room, and actually you'll find out that often people don't have been waiting to think, assume that everyone else knew, but actually it's not true. No one did, and actually you've just you've raised your hand and said the thing that everyone thinks they cannot say. And I think those are um, the experiences I've had, and I suppose yes, go leap in and see if it works for you.
Awesome.
I would echo and underscore that. And one of our first studies in the workforce space was an evaluation of what the future jobs, I mean, in the next sort of 3 to 5 years, according to the survey that we did, what positions were going to be filled, and then what skills and knowledge and what degrees would the employers look for in those jobs. And when we analyzed the results and discovered that, in fact, a PhD wasn't the preferred degree for most of the jobs, and most of the skills were not quantum based or specifically quantum related. And the paper is available on the QEDC website under publications. But what was interesting was some skills were checked by just 1 or 2 of the survey respondents, and some skills were checked by many of them. And we called those the important skills. And so if someone is interested in equipping themselves to be eligible or qualified for as many positions, as many pathways as possible, it would make sense to go and try to check off some of those important skills, because that's what most employers are looking for. And I would just underscore what Kirsten was saying, and that is, I think the saying is, a journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. So don't be, intimidated by this long goal that you may be setting for yourself. Just take the next step, and that will lead to another one. I think all of us are operating in sort of a startup mode one way or another, and we're all sort of living that in real time, figuring out what we need to do next and working towards a sort of a longer term goal.
I would agree. And I feel like I almost even counted myself out of being in the quantum industry just because the word quantum is so intimidating. Like, am I smart enough? I was in like a class with all men. I was the only woman as well. And so I feel like there's a lot of imposter syndrome and stuff. And so I really love that message of don't count yourself out. And I feel like, Kiera, the work that you do with quantum education and accessibility gives people the resources to make sure that they don't count themselves out and they feel confident in their ability to know quantum. So what advice would you have for someone just starting off?
Yeah, I mean, I like to tell our students that, again, as long as you're willing to work hard, you can do quantum computing. You can be in the quantum space, and there's a lot of different roles that you can be playing, as Celia mentioned. Um, and I like to even think more expansive than those that are going to be building, quantum technologies. We need marketers who understand how to talk about these technologies. We need policymakers who understand how to regulate these technologies. We need investors who actually understand how long it's going to take to develop these technologies and provide the appropriate resources and investments. And so there's a space for everyone, whether it's being a builder of the next generation of quantum technologies, being an advocate, being a user, or being a regulator. And so I think that's the starting point. And that all of those jobs require some degree of knowledge of quantum. So that's first, I think, is really finding the role that makes sense, but recognizing that they all are going to involve some level of knowledge. And then the second thing that I would say, um, is, there's a lot of resources and opportunities out there to be learning quantum. Um, Ours at Qubit by Qubit and the coding school among them. Um, but I do want students to not get discouraged. I often, again, get kind of nervous by how much is out there and how much is available. And going back to saying not all of it is necessarily going to be accessible. So again, a lot of programs still require a high degree of math, and that can really scare students and make them feel like they don't belong. And the advice that I would give is, if you're in a class and you're not understanding the material and you're working hard and willing to work hard, the problem is often not going to be you. It might be how you're being taught. We've had a number of students who have failed or dropped out of an introductory quantum computing course at their university, for example. And for, a number of different reasons. It was intimidating, it went too fast, it required too many prerequisites. And they've taken, a class with us, or maybe they've done other self-learning, and they were able to go back and take that introductory class again and pass. And all they required was a little bit more support, learning the content in a slightly different way, or in a slightly slower fashion, or with fewer prerequisites. And so I just say, like, anyone can do this, and everyone can and should be learning this. It's just as finding the right starting place for you. But it really is just starting. As everyone else has said, you just kind of have to be willing to jump in. You have to be willing to know that you're going to fail and you're not going to understand everything right away. And like, the goal is not to know everything, because no one in this field knows everything. We don't have the technologies working the way we want them to, but it's just to learn how to fail better and fail faster and be comfortable kind of being in that state, which I personally think is a really freeing position to be um, in STEM, to know that failure means that you're getting closer to success, that like we should be celebrating failure. And I think that's a core part of the learning experience in anyone's quantum journey.
Wow, so beautifully put. And
Mhm.
yeah, I think there's so many online resources available that it can be really overwhelming sometimes. So I love that advice to like make sure to not feel like you don't belong just because the resource isn't right for you. And you pointed out that the coding school is a good starting point. We also have a Kiskit Global Summer School going on right now for our viewers, which is International Year of Quantum themed. with the support of UNESCO and the ITU. And registration is open and it's completely free and online. So if you're looking for resources, there's so many. I actually started my quantum journey through YouTube videos during the pandemic. And so don't feel like you need to have a PhD to learn. Um, awesome. And so I think we're almost at time for audience questions now. And so I will open up the floor to audience questions. So one thing while we wait for some questions to come through, I wanted to ask you all is what is one of your favorite things that you've achieved throughout your career? And could you tell us a little bit more about that?
Well, I think I'm the most senior person here, and I've had a long and sort of unusual path that I didn't anticipate. That's, I guess, another message is that opportunities will present themselves, and whatever you do next is probably not going to be your last job, just your next one. So you live, you learn, and you get another opportunity. And my background, which I sort of alluded to at the beginning, started in an entirely different field in a way. Then I went into materials science, which led to nanomaterials research, and that led to an opportunity to work at very high levels in government, policy position, sort of managing the National Nanotechnology Initiative, a big whole of government multi-agency program. And that I learned so much how to work across organizations and different interests and stakeholders and agendas. And then I left government and worked in a consortium, an industry consortium, and again learned how competitors could come together and find some common problems and work together. And so then when I had the opportunity to kind of create QEDC, I was bringing that knowledge of how the government works, how the industry can work together. And I'm really, really proud in a way of what QEDC has become as a result of those sort of experiences that I was able to build upon and to bring to the current role. And as was mentioned earlier, culture is very, very important. And I think anyone who's leading a group or a project or a team or an organization sets by example. And if you're showing people how to be dedicated, how to do, bring everything to the table, how to focus, how to work with others, et cetera, then it just flows out and it really becomes part of the organization. And so I'm really pleased with what QEDC has become, and I am hopefully confident that it's a base, a foundation that will be good for the long term.
I have to say, I love that. Leading by example is definitely one of my, yeah, I think. And then maybe I'll just jump in to say it's actually quite similar to Celia. I've had also a very diverse journey, and it's difficult to pinpoint exactly a moment that I was very proud of, and I'm not very good at doing that in general anyway. But I think definitely the diversity of experience I've had from working in big corporations, high growth startups, also government institutions as well, being able to pick out the things that have worked and have not worked and bringing to algorithmic today. But I suppose one thing to remember is, and that I've learned, is that there are no rules. And I often think that the best thing you can do is sometimes unlearn some of the things that you have that might have worked very well in the corporate, and just really start to think from first principles when you're in a new environment, especially in deep tech and space like quantum. And the more you can unlearn and really think from first person what you've got at hand, and pull the different knowledge of the people and your experience, but really assessing whether or not it would work in the situation, I think is very valuable. And sometimes we forget to unlearn and relearn again.
And to jump in here, I think as I reflect back and think about kind of our journey into quantum education, I am really amazed by how much has changed over the last 5 to 6 years. and how much I'm sure will even rapidly accelerate and continue to change. But I think I'm really proud of the fact that, um, you know, it's not even a debate any longer, whether younger students and those outside of kind of advanced STEM degrees can be learning quantum. That was certainly, if this had been 5 years ago, I certainly would have gone pushback and questions of, you know, can a high school student really learn quantum without the math? There were very few people when we started off who believed that you could be teaching quantum computing without the math. And now it's not a question. Everyone believes that it is not only possible, but that we should be doing this. And so I'm really proud that our work at Qubit by Qubit has been able to kind of contribute to changing that narrative and change that belief and view. And that now it is seen as not just possible, but something that should be done.
Wow. I feel like I'm learning so much during this panel, so many great lessons. So the next question is, what's something that's happening in the quantum space right now that you're excited about? And the floor is
Maybe I'll go first, and because I have sort of this catbird seat, I have 240 members, and I hear about what's going on from all of them, and it's just so exciting. So you obviously can kind of watch the headlines. There are announcements every day, and meetings and events every week that are, where you can see things happening so quickly. And so it's not like a field of sort of dusty research where you have to wait for a publication to appear many months later. It's just happening so quickly, and that's very exciting. And I often point out there needs to be progress in the hardware, and that's what you kind of focus on sometimes. But there also needs to be progress in what's called error correction to make the systems function properly. And then there needs to be software and algorithm development. And we need all three of those. And so again, there are sort of tools and skill sets that are going to help move all of those, forward. And so the use cases are unknown, really. Most of what we're going to do with quantum computers, we have no idea. And I think that's a huge area of opportunity. And I just wanted to sort of emphasize, I think, something that Kira said, which is there are not only going to be different roles within the companies that are making and developing the technology, there will be quantum expertise needed in almost every company and every business, because in pharmaceuticals, they're going to need to understand how to use quantum computing for the work they do, in advanced manufacturing, in banking. And so there's going to be more what I call quantum takers than quantum makers in a few years. And we're sort of seeing that evolution already happening. And it's very exciting. It's not the sort of window. Companies are going from I'm watching, I'm monitoring, I'm reading the headlines, to I need to hire some expertise. I need to build up the ability to be able to adapt and adopt this technology as it becomes something that's useful in the next few years, thanks to IBM and others doing the work they're doing.
No, I completely agree. I feel like even when I joined the industry, there was a misconception that you needed a PhD to enter, which you don't. I will say, like most of the people I work with have a bachelor's, and it's a bachelor's in something non-quantum related, like library science, design, and an MBA, art, and then computer science, computer engineering. And so that is a really big lesson, I think, to take away from the panel is whatever background you have, it's a strength, not really a weakness. And then, Kirsten, I would love to get your take on that question.
I think it's actually along the similar lines as Julia. Again, I would say there has been a huge inflection point in the last few months in terms of really sort of commercialization of productization of the research, and really an inbound interest, anyway, from what we've experienced as a startup, inbound interest from almost weekly from hardware partners, end users, and it's really accelerating as we see. And the use cases, I mean, when you looked at how it was a couple of years ago when you were fundraising, now we can point to that 10 different use cases where quantum can actually be truly meaningfully useful. And the other thing I was going to say is the acceleration in the number of applications we receive a day from an internship or research or even business development perspective. I mean, we are 3 to 5 every single day. We receive application, and it keeps accelerating. So there's definitely a shift I felt this year in terms of really the quantum is coming out of the labs, and really everyone is putting their minds together to try to productize it, commercialize it, find go-to-market strategies that work together, and doing this jointly between hardware and software as well. I mean, we ran a brainstorm session yesterday with a pharma company. I mean, it's really happening, and it's extremely exciting. I've only experienced quantum for 3.5 years in my life, and I can see the progress and the acceleration happening right now. And we haven't even yet really got to the point of proving a quantum advantage yet. So when that comes, which I think is really around the corner, in 2026, 2027, it'll be a huge, for me, that's the most exciting part to come.
Wow. Yeah, I feel like it's such an exciting time to be in the industry. And I'm so excited that we were able to bring all three of you guys together for this panel, because I feel like it's rare to bring such powerful leaders together, who are from such different stages, yet working so closely together in their different avenues. So thank you guys for being here. I truly learned a lot about how to get started, whether you don't know nothing about quantum or you are early in your career, and about how blossoming and exciting this industry is. So thank you guys. And with that, I think we're out of time. Thank you once again to our host, the ITU, and to all of our panelists for sharing their expertise and taking time out of their busy schedules. So big round of applause for you guys. And with that, I'll hand it back over to the AI for Good platform.
Thank you for participating in today's AI for Good session. We hope you've learnt something new, innovative, and engaging in today's event. We now encourage you to continue the conversation on the live video wall in the neural network. Here you can ask questions, like and comment, share links, complete the poll, connect with interesting profiles, or speak one-on-one using the chat and video function. We invite you to explore the lobby, try the smart matching quiz, visit the virtual exhibits, poster boards, the e-shop, and build your personalized AI for Good program. Let's shape the future of AI for good.